Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. As always, please hit the like button if you like the video. It really does help the creators that you enjoy. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and you can also join my Patreon. We are in the midst of a fundraiser for a very important goal, and I will talk about that at the end of the video. As much as I hate these stories and the men at the heart of them, I must admit that I find them fascinating. The Family Annihilator is an interesting study, even though they are some of the most despicable humans on the planet. What makes a man do the unthinkable? We all know that there are men out there who truly believe the moon and the sun and the stars orbit around them and their giant egos. But is ego enough to kill those closest to you? Sadly, I believe the answer to be yes. But it can't be all about ego. There has to be more to the psychopathy of the Family Annihilator. This is an old story, but it has a very recent and shocking update, and I think we're going to be seeing a documentary about it very soon. Each time I bring you one of these stories, I go into the research thinking I'll learn more about these types of killers. What usually happens instead is I am left with more questions than answers. This is the story of an evil man, a true monster. William Bradford Bishop, one of the worst dads ever. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. Our story begins in Bethesda, Maryland. William Bradford Bishop and his family have made a nice life for themselves there. Bradford was born in 1936 in Pasadena, California. He went by Brad. He was a great student. He was smart. He did very well as a kid, and he got accepted to Yale. He graduated from Yale with a bachelor's degree in history, and then he got his master's degree in international studies from Middlebury College. Brad then got a second master's degree in African studies from UCLA. So right off the bat, we have a very high achiever here, and that is something that we see with family annihilators. This is someone who wants to have an education. They want to have credibility. They are motivated to get those degrees to show that they are not only well educated, but motivated and responsible enough to get those degrees. There's nothing wrong with any of that. We just like to talk about the psychology of these people as we go, always from a layperson's standpoint. I have no education in psychology. These are my observations based on the research I do and the conversations that I have with you. Brad graduated from Yale in 1959, and then he married his high school sweetheart, a woman named Annette Wells. Annette soon became pregnant with their first son, William Bradford Bishop III. Brad himself is named after his father, so he is the second. A few years later, the couple's second son, Jeffrey Corder Bishop, was born, and then a couple of years after that, Brenton Germain Bishop was born. With 3 beautiful sons and a beautiful wife, it looked like Brad had it all. In the midst of the children being born, Brad joined the Army and spent 4 years in the counterintelligence area. The Army was very pleased to have this well-educated man in their ranks, and he moved up those ranks very quickly. Because Brad was so smart, his superiors utilized his intelligence, and through his work, he learned to speak fluently Italian, French, Serbo-Croatian, and Spanish. This is a smart guy. I've been trying to kind of lazily learn Spanish for years now. I'm still awful at it. One of these days, I am really going to give it a go. But learning another language is not easy, and I think it's a testament to Brad's intelligence that he spoke 5 languages fluently. Brad finished his stint with the Army, and then he joined the U.S. State Department and served in the Foreign Services in multiple postings overseas. The family lived in Italy for quite some time, starting in Verona and then moving to Milan and Florence. In Florence, Bradford went back to college and did more postgraduate work at the University of Florence. He finished that in 1972. After that, the family lived in Africa. They went from Addis Ababa to Ethiopia to Gaborone, Botswana. This is quite the life, isn't it? These kids are at a very young age, and they're seeing more of the world than I've ever seen. It was a very interesting life for them, I'm sure, and one that was filled with exposure to a lot of different cultures. After Brad's last posting in Africa, He took a job at State Department headquarters in Washington, D.C. as assistant chief in the Division of Special Activities and Commercial Treaties. It was a very important job with high security clearance, and Brad was well respected. He was liked, and he was thought of as an asset not only to the government, but to the country. Brad had degrees from very prestigious universities all around the world. He knew how to fly a plane, he spoke 5 languages, and he had a very important job. But there was another side to Brad Bishop, and it's one that a lot of us can relate to. Brad suffered with depression. He would have terrible bouts of depression that changed his mood, that kept him from enjoying all the success he had, and that made him moody and unhappy. Apparently, both Brad and his wife Annette were under the care of a psychiatrist that they saw several times a month. And that psychiatrist had prescribed Serax for Brad. This is the drug oxapam that is used for treating insomnia. It's actually an anti-anxiety drug, but because it is a benzodiazepine, it makes people sleepy. Benzos are also highly addictive. Brad had terrible insomnia and would sometimes go days without sleeping. He was known to wander around the house at night, and the insomnia made him stressed and irritable. Brad's mother, 69-year-old Lobelia, was also living with the family. She helped take care of the household and the kids, and on the outside, it really seemed like they had the life. But there is apparently a saying in the State Department, and it goes like this: it's up or it's out. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you're not promoted by a certain point in your career in the State Department, you're not going to be. The people who work these positions are under immense pressure, and the pressure to be promoted is part of that reason. From the time you enter the State Department, the clock is ticking. You either become a superstar or you fall by the wayside. And there are a lot of candidates for superstar. These are well-educated people. They are people who have military experience, people of great intelligence, and they are also very, very competitive. By 1976, with all of these impressive postings under his belt, fluent in 5 languages, devoted to his work, Brad Bishop was expecting a promotion at work. He told his wife he was sure he was going to get a higher position than the one he was currently at. He felt he deserved this promotion. He felt he was the most qualified, and he was ready and excited to take on greater responsibility as he continued to rise through the ranks at the State Department. Sadly, this promotion went to someone else. It did not happen for Brad, but it turned out to be a much, much sadder situation for his young family. William Bradford Bishop learns that he is not going to receive the promotion he sought at work. He was devastated. He had been convinced that this promotion was his. In his mind, there weren't even other qualified candidates. Now, whether this is true or not, who knows? I would venture a guess that Bradford had a very high opinion of himself, and perhaps this caused him to overlook other people's qualifications. Finding out that he was not going to get this promotion was shocking to him, and it was embarrassing. He had already told people he was going to get promoted. He was angry and he was humiliated. Something broke inside William Bradford Bishop's mind, something that possibly had been bubbling under the surface for many years. Or maybe not. Maybe he snapped. He was 40 years old. He had spent his life doing everything he could to make people proud of him. He'd worked so hard, he'd achieved so much, and still it wasn't enough to get this crappy promotion at work. And Brad Bishop decided he was done. Brad walked out of his office after being told he was not getting the promotion and told his secretary that he wasn't feeling well. He said he was going to go home. Instead, Brad drove from the Foggy Bottom neighborhood where his office was located and went straight to his bank where he withdrew several $100s. Then he drove here to the Montgomery Mall in Bethesda. He walked down these hallways and into the Sears there at the mall, where he purchased a sledgehammer and a gas can. Brad went back to his car and drove next door to the gas station, where he filled the gas can as well as the family station wagon. Then he drove to a store called Pox Hardware that at the time was located next to a Safeway grocery store between River Road and Falls Road. Inside the hardware store, Bradford purchased a shovel and a pitchfork. I cannot help but picture Brad Bishop going through these motions. I kind of put myself behind his eyes as he leaves his office, goes to his car. His face is hot, and he's got a lump in his throat. He's angry, he's raging, he's humiliated. He's not feeling well, but he's calm. He's very, very calm. I can kind of see his hands, on the steering wheel of the car, and hear his feet on the asphalt as he walks into the mall and then into the hardware store. I envision the sounds of his breathing as he loads the tools into the car and shuts the door, all knowing what he is about to go home and do. I can't help but wonder, did he stop at all? Did he stop and think, this is crazy, what am I doing? Did he hesitate? Did he pull over on the side of the road and sit there for a minute? There is something about this man that makes me doubt he did any of that. There is something about Brad Bishop that makes me believe he was a man of conviction, and that once he decided he was going to do something, there was no going back. Brad Bishop pulled into the driveway of his home with his family inside. He went to the back of the station wagon and pulled out the items he purchased, and then he walked into his home carrying the sledgehammer he had just bought. For what purpose? To kill. It was around 8 o'clock at night. The kids had already gone to bed. Brad walked into his home, found his wife, and bludgeoned her to death. I cannot imagine what this poor woman must have been thinking, to hear her husband pull into the drive like he did every night, and then to see him walking into their house holding a sledgehammer he then raises and starts hitting her with. Brad then saw his mother outside, returning to the house from walking the family's golden retriever. He waited for her to enter the home, and then he killed her. I won't go into much detail here, but Brad then went to the boys' bedroom and killed all 3 of his sons, who were 14, 10, and 5 years old at the time of their murders. There are no words, Patricide is something that most of us can't even wrap our heads around, but to kill your entire family in the family home, your own mother, your partner, your children, it is something, no matter how many stories like this I hear, no matter how many I research and write, I can't put my head around it. After the terrible acts were committed, Brad loaded each of the 5 bodies into the family station wagon and drove about 275 miles to a very dense wooded area, kind of a swampy area outside of Columbia, North Carolina. As the sun set on the last day of his life as he knew it, Brad sat in his car with the dead bodies of his entire family. He waited until dark, and then he stepped out of the car with the shovel he bought at his little hometown hardware store. He walked out into the thickets, and he began to dig. He was not digging graves. His family didn't even deserve those. He was digging a hole just shallow enough to contain the bodies and the fire that he was going to set. After the shallow pit was dug, Brad dragged the bodies one by one into the dirt. He piled them on top of each other and retrieved the gas can he had just filled hours earlier. He doused the bodies and he set them on fire. Brad then threw the pitchfork, the shovel, and the gas can next to the bodies and got back in his car. He drove away as the thick black smoke made its way to the sky. 2 hours later, a spotter in a fire tower contacted the ranger station and informed them of the fire. A North Carolina forest ranger was dispatched to the area where he discovered the still smoldering bodies and the tools left behind by Brad Bishop. The sight was horrific, and word quickly spread that there had been a massacre. A phone call comes into the Bethesda Police Department. On the other end is a neighbor of the Bishop family, and they are concerned. This neighbor tells police that the Bishop family is always out and about. There's always lots of activity in the yard, kids coming and going from school. Lobelia or Annette is out walking the dog several times a day. But for more than a week, this neighbor has not seen a single soul. The kids have not been in the yard. No one has been walking the dog. The house is just dead quiet. Much too quiet. A patrol officer was sent to the Bishop home to do a wellness check. As he walked up the front steps to the house, he immediately noticed blood on the porch and on the stairs. The neighbor that called the police came directly to the house when they saw the police car pull up, and this neighbor was so close to the Bishop family that they had a key to the house. So the neighbor used that key to unlock the door, and the police officer went inside. As he stepped in, he could feel it. Something was very, very wrong. Then he saw that there was blood splatter on the floor and the walls of the entryway. He put his hand on his gun and he walked down the hallway and came to the boys' room. When he looked inside, he could not believe what he saw. The bedroom was covered in blood. The officer stepped backwards, not believing what he was seeing. The room had basically been painted. Then this cop's heart sank as he looked up at the ceiling above the bunk beds shared by two of the boys. There were large holes in the ceiling, holes that had been left by the sledgehammer as it was raised and lowered and raised again. This officer would later say it was the worst thing he ever saw. With the discovery of the crime scene and the discovery of the bodies, authorities now knew those bodies had to belong to the missing family. One by one, the bodies were loaded into coroner vans and taken for autopsy. Dental records were used to confirm that the bodies found in North Carolina were the bodies of the Bishop family, minus one. And then they knew Brad Bishop was a family annihilator. He had killed his entire family. The investigation began immediately. Police began canvassing not only the neighborhood around the Bishop home, but the stores in the area and the area around the barn site. The shovel Bradford left behind at the burn site had a label on it with the code of OCHHDW. Cops quickly discovered that this was the code used by Pox Hardware, and the store confirmed that yes, Brad Bishop purchased that shovel on March 1st. Then someone came forward and said that they had seen Brad Bishop in the family station wagon purchasing a pair of sneakers at a nearby store in North Carolina. This person said that Brad had the family dog with him, the golden retriever, and a woman that they described as dark-skinned. So now this brought up an entirely new set of questions. Did Brad Bishop have a lover? Was he cheating on Annette? Was he living a double life? Or was this just a woman that he had picked up for company? Friends and neighbors alike were shocked isn't the word. This man worked for the State Department. He had security clearance. He was well educated and respected. He was not someone that anyone could imagine capable of doing such a terrible thing. Yet he had. As the police continued to investigate, they very quickly discovered that Brad Bishop was living in a house of cards. First off, the family spent more money than Brad made. That is the reason he was so desperate for the promotion. Brad was actually living off of money that he borrowed from his mother. He didn't want his mother living with them, but because he owed her so much money, he felt obligated to let her stay with the family. Then close friends of Annette's came forward and told investigators that Annette had confided in them she was going to have to get a job. She said the kids were in school all day now, with the exception of the 5-year-old. Oh, the 5-year-old. And that the family was having financial problems. Annette also told friends that Brad hated his desk job at the State Department and he wanted the promotion so he could work overseas. The problem was, not only did Brad not get the promotion, neither Annette nor Lobelia wanted to live overseas anymore. So even if Brad had received the promotion, a larger problem was waiting for him at home to be addressed. Brad's family did not want to live outside the States. So you can kind of feel the pressure building on this man, right? And the police now had a better understanding of the pressures this man was facing. They had a glimpse into his life that confirmed this was a very unhappy man. This was a man who wanted to live a lifestyle where his family just didn't fit in. Brad saw himself as kind of, international man of mystery, and that is not great for family life. So Brad had simply decided to get rid of his family. Police knew that Brad had a pretty good head start on them. The bodies were discovered quickly, but they didn't identify them quickly. It was 10 days before the crime scene was discovered, and it was determined that it was the Bishop family burning in North Carolina. In that amount of time, in the 1970s, Brad Bishop could be anywhere in the world. There was no TSA, there were no safety checkpoints at airports. You didn't even have to show an ID to fly. This man could have flown literally anywhere on Earth, and there was absolutely no way to track him. Police got a break when on March 18th, the 1974 maroon Chevy station wagon was found abandoned at an isolated campground in Elkmont, Tennessee, inside the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This was the family vehicle. The car was sitting just a few miles from the Appalachian Trail, which is 400 miles away from the Columbia, North Carolina site where the bodies were burned. The station wagon was covered in blood. Inside were dog biscuits, a bloody blanket, an axe, a shotgun, and a shaving kit which contained Brad's prescription for Serax. So this was kind of like, he's going off of his medication, I guess. Maybe he didn't think he needed it anymore. When the cops opened the trunk, it was like something out of a horror film. Blood and other matter was present. A witness that had been staying at the campground told the police that that car had been there since March 6th. Now, the police thought that Brad might have chosen to disappear onto the Appalachian Trail. So they gathered hunting dogs together and tried to follow his scent. The dogs first seemed to be tracking Brad, but soon they were lost. The day after the car was found, a grand jury indicted Brad Bishop on 5 counts of first-degree murder, along with additional charges related to the killings. One of the lead investigators on the case was a man named Lewis Young. He spent days driving around Bethesda downtown, just watching people to see if there was any chance that Bradford had made his way back to the area. That sounds crazy, but remember the monster of Miramichi, that crazed lunatic who got loose, he escaped prison, and he went right back to his old stomping grounds. It does happen. Lewis Young, this cop, also spent hours putting up wanted posters in Potomac and Bethesda with Brad's face on them, hoping that someone in the area might recognize the killer. A week went by. People were sure the police would be able to find this madman. Yes, he had a head start, but he couldn't hide from the entire world. Then a month went by. The sentiment was basically the same. But then 3 months passed, and then 6, and then a year. Brad Bishop had vanished. The trail had gone ice cold, and there was not a single clue as to where he had disappeared to. In 1978, a Swedish woman contacted authorities and informed them that years earlier, she met Brad Bishop in Ethiopia while she was there for a work assignment. She had had several meetings with Brad as she was part of this collaboration between the two companies that were working together. Well, this woman told the police that she was absolutely certain, those were her words, that she had seen Brad Bishop not once, but twice in a public park in Stockholm. The police followed these leads, but they went nowhere. In January of 1979, a former U.S. State Department colleague of Brad Bishop's came forward and said that he was in a restroom in Sorrento, Italy, when he turned the corner and came face to face with Brad Bishop. The man said Brad had grown a long beard, and he said to him, "Hey, you're Brad Bishop, aren't you?" This guy said that the man panicked and said with an American accent, oh no, before running out of the restroom and into an alleyway. The police checked on those leads, but they went nowhere. On September 19th, 1994, a neighbor of the Bishop family in Bethesda, Maryland, was on vacation in Basel, Switzerland. He comes forward to tell the police that he knows for a fact he saw Brad Bishop driving in a car while he was sitting on a train. He was on the train was moving, he looked out and he saw Brad Bishop. Obviously, this man couldn't do anything because he was on the train. So again, this lead was followed, and again, it went nowhere. Decades go by. On April 10th, 2014, Brad Bishop was placed on the infamous top 10 most wanted fugitives list. He stayed there for 4 years, and he was then removed when he would have been 81 years old to make room for a more dangerous fugitive. To this very day, no one knows what happened to William Bradford Bishop. He has never been found, and he has never been captured. If he is still alive, he is 87 years old right now, and this is what he most likely looks like. There have been sculptures and sketches made of this man over the years. We have the ability to guess with some certainty about his appearance, but no one knows where this monster is. How did he live his life? Where did he live his life? We don't know. But this story has taken a very recent and shocking turn. In 2021, this woman came forward and stated that she had been doing her genealogy. This is Kathy Gilchrist, and she is about 65 years old. She claims to be the biological daughter of Brad Bishop, a daughter he most likely never knew existed. While Brad Bishop was in college in New England at Yale, he had a relationship with a female student and she became pregnant. Kathy had been doing research and she submitted to DNA testing. Evidence was still in existence, evidence taken from the Bishop home after the murders, and it was compared with Kathy Gilchrist's DNA and confirmed she is the biological daughter of Brad Bishop. Her young mother had given her up for adoption after she was born, but the FBI itself has verified Brad Bishop is her biological father.
I mean, what he did was so heinous. And I feel like if I ever really met him, it was because he probably wanted to be found. And I said, is he somebody famous? She said, yeah, but I'm going to let you Google him yourself. So I did. And what came up was his FBI most wanted poster.
Her father is believed to be William Bradford Bishop, wanted by the FBI for murdering his wife, mother, and 3 kids and dumping their bodies in the remote North Carolina woods in the 1970s. He then abandoned his car at the Elkmont campground in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and has been wanted by authorities across the globe ever since.
She told me that she was absolutely shocked, but yes, the evidence showed that I was indeed matched to Brad.
Kathy was shocked too.
It was kind of creepy when I found out it was for real. It did make me pause for a minute and say, wait a minute, this is scary.
That's when the messages started coming of people who swear they were once part of her father's life.
It started on Mother's Day. I started getting these phone calls.
I'm 99.9% sure I know who he is.
He swore that Brad Bishop lived very reclusively in a little shack of some kind in upstate Wisconsin. A message from an EMT who formerly lived in California, and he said, I've been trying to reach you because I know I treated Brad Bishop 2 years ago.
But the most interesting to Kathy were the messages of people who grew up with her father, a cousin, and a neighbor who told Kathy more about her grandmother. They all look alike. Kathy thinks Bishop is still alive, but if she ever met him, she'd turn him in. Kathy continues to search and learn more about her father's life and the series of events that kept her from her father, sparing her life on that fateful night 45 years ago.
The police believe that Brad has spent most of his life hiding somewhere in the U.S. They do believe he was in Switzerland for a time around 2010. It was recently revealed that before the murders, Brad had been writing letters to an inmate named Albert Kenneth Bankston, who was in the U.S. penitentiary in Marion, Illinois. But the context of those letters has never been revealed. Bankston died in 1983, 10 years before the cops tied him to Brad Bishop. I would really like to know what he was writing to this prisoner about. In 2014, part of what some people saw as this mystery was solved. In 1981, there was a man that looked a lot like Brad Bishop that was found on the side of the road after being hit a road in Alabama. For years, people believed this man was Brad Bishop. DNA testing in 2014 revealed it was not. There have been reports that Brad died in Hong Kong. There are reports that he died in France. Fingerprints confirmed that both of the men in those cases were not Brad Bishop. Brad Bishop drove away from his life that day and disappeared like the smoke he left trailing into the sky. We do not know what happened to him, and there is a very good chance we never will. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to support me. You can also join my Patreon for a few bucks a month. You keep the videos coming. And we are also doing a really important fundraiser there. This is the thumbnail on my channel that will take you to the video explaining what we're doing. We are raising money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage that's never been tested. We would like to pick some cases, pay to have those DNA kits tested, and maybe solve some cold cases. I sure appreciate you. I hope you're doing well, and I want you to know that your support means the world to me. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.